take it anymore. Feel I'm going insane. Shaken to my core, and I can't take the pain of your ice cold stare of judgment lies birth within my soul. Your wicked laughter and my cries, the system overload. So burn the flame through the night. I'll suffer to rid of you, my God. Bury yourself in cold black ember. I'll rise and kingdom come. May the sun shine and burn these chains, shackle my rambles free. Though the night will come to blind and seduce, you won't be taking me. And you don't break new chapters and fall, but you secret in my mind. With my blood on your hands left alone in the cold of dwelling, but they will find. So burn the flame through the night. I'll suffer to be rid of you, my God. Bury yourself in cold black ember. I'll rise and kingdom come. With the hand on my side, freedom will be mine. I'll finish this tale of woe, but you can die this time.
Hello, it is Jackhammer 47 here, and yes, that is going through good. Nothing like last minute to actually check that certain things should actually be working. But yes, it is. Oh, man, I'm dropping water all right from my beard and everything. It is very, very warm. As you can tell by the fact that I'm wearing my orange pajamas again, because they're shorts. Oh, and trust me, it's so warm. And before we get started, quick thing. Thank you for following. Thank you for the follow. Molly with 2 Y's and Elaine, and then with an extra E on the end. So thank you for the follow there. You followed on a day I wasn't actually streaming, but so I couldn't say it at the time, naturally. But thank you for this follow. And yeah, now it's out of the way. Let's push the boundaries of what it means to be a variety streamer. You see, normally when people say about variety streams, it's always music and all that. Not music. That's what I'm doing now. It's normally games and stuff. They don't stick to one game. But it's too warm for me to be bothered to game today. Or at the very least, I might do later, after the stream, quite a bit later on. Because it is so warm. It is so unbelievably warm. So yes, I will have to apologize. There is fan noise. That is going to stay. There's probably going to be outside noise because my window's wide open. That's going to stay. It is too warm. I am not streaming without that stuff. I'm just not. I'm going to stream with it. So as I mentioned last time, down below here, just below the logo, which is like here-ish, I've also got the donation thing. If you feel like donating, then it will be very much appreciated. But again, as per usual, do not donate unless you financially can. Unless you have, like, you know, you're in good enough stead that you can consider it. If you're not, don't. But yes. Yeah, this one's gonna be interesting. I've never done. Actually, no, I have. It's not that I've never done a music live stream before. That I have done. This is gonna be interesting because I'm breaking down my mix. So this is gonna be very interesting to say the least. So we will have to see how it goes. But yeah, we'll just have to see. We'll just have to see how things turn out. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. As per usual, make sure you have water. It's right in now in the UK is in a heat wave, so it's best to, as much as you can, keep hydrated. Make sure you're good. You know, I've got a bit of water here. Eventually I'll take a break and I'll go get some more. But yeah, the humidity. Yeah, as much as the weather isn't so bad in the UK right now, it's the humidity that's like horrible. It's like it's making my beard all fluff up and everything, and it's like, yeah, stop that. No amount of stuff I'm doing is fixing that. But it's unbelievably warm in the UK right now. It's not nice. But yeah, it's a thing. So make sure you have water, hydrate, and all that stuff. Make sure you're good. Keep yourself cool. Like I said, there's a fan going. That's gonna stay. As noisy as it is, it's gonna have to stay. And the window being open as well, there's going to be outside noise. We're going to have to deal with it. Because it is very well. I'll probably game again Thursday. So if you're looking for me when I'm going to be doing a game again, I'll be doing a game Thursday. But today, I figured, yeah, let's do something different. Let's push the boundaries of what it means to be a variety streamer. Because, as I mentioned just a bit before, a variety streamer normally indicates that you'll play games, but multitudes of games. In this, I'm going to be like, nah. Let's go full variety. Let's just swap what content I'm actually making and go, I do gaming normally. Let's do a music one just to see how it goes. I mean, the idea is that this whole breakdown is going to go up on YouTube as well, and then on the Twitch archive channel, which, by the way, check out. It's currently labeled everywhere as Jackhammer47 Gaming. I don't think I'm going to be necessarily doing gaming content on there again, but it's there. But yeah, it's a Twitch archive channel now. But that'll be on there. And on my main channel, which is the music channel, there's going to be an edited down version of this, in whichever form this ends up taking. So this ought to be interesting. So the actual song I'm going to be breaking down is my cover of Calliope Mori's Excuse My Rudeness, But Would You Please Rip. So, I've already looked into it. Cover are fine as long as you're with making videos of their songs and making covers of them. And in this case, I'm making a tutorial on how I made my version of the cover, which, if anything, is potentially just exposing more people to the music. And again, I don't make money from Twitch, therefore, and even then, it's not like I'm paywalling it or anything like that. I'm not trying to sell it for money. Again, as I said with the donation thing, if you're able to. But then again, at no point do you have to. I am perfectly happy with people just watching. But yes, let's actually get to it. let's get into my recording program. And let's get into the music. So, here we go. That's also the background music is gone, and now instead we are in Pro Tools. Now this isn't the newest version of Pro Tools. I'm just going to click into it so now I can actually control Pro Tools and all the good stuff. This isn't the newest version of Pro Tools. This is Pro Tools 11. It's a fairly old version of Pro Tools now, actually. At least I'm pretty sure it's 11. It's not the new one. I think the newest one is technically either 12 or 13. But yeah, this is 11. This is Pro Tools 11. So, because yeah, upgrading costs money. And yeah, it's Pro Tools can be expensive. I got this on student discount because everything we were doing at uni was Pro Tools. So it made sense to have a copy of it at home. And you'll be saying, why not just crack it? And for a while I did. But it was very annoying with the constant having to save over and over and over again. So, on the one hand, it did teach me to save regularly, but on the other hand, which, by the way, I'm going to do now, save, even though I'm not really editing anything, save anyway, so that everything is working. But, yeah, so this is what the this is what it actually looks like. If I zoom out on here a bit, you can actually see the full song just there. That is the start to the end of the full song, and these are all the audio tracks I use. There's not that many, which might be surprising for some people, but this is heavy metal, so it means that things are usually hard panned to either side, and that makes things very thick and wide. With also, there's also the staging of how we do things, sorting out frequencies. This is all things I can get into, but yes. So the way it works in this is I have the bass, I have the lead guitar, I have what I dub an extra guitar. Technically it's an extra rhythm guitar, or a third rhythm guitar, if you want to see it like that. And then I have the harmony guitars, the rhythm guitars, and a few stems from the original track, and the vocals themselves. And of course I have drums, which then go out to all these channels here. And then I've got the master. The master I'll come to last, because mastering and all that. But so yes, obviously I did like the song, hence why I made the cover of it. I always try to make, well, pretty much every cover I make is of a song that I actually like. If I don't like the song, I don't think I can do good justice into actually making a cover of the song, because I like to play around with things a little bit. As you can see here, where there's a big cut off here, clearly I've just either well, it depends. If you don't know the song, or you've never seen the waveform of the song, or the vocals rather in this case, you probably wouldn't know that what I've done is I've split there and just dragged them apart, just so there's a bit more time between where this starting part ends and the main bulk of it starts. It's an odd way of saying it, but it technically is right. But yes, there are things you can't see in this. There are things you can't see. I hide tracks quite a bit as well. In fact, if I click to the side here, there's actually a hidden track, if I remember rightly. Actually, no, that on this one there isn't a hidden track. Never mind. Yeah, okay, I'll explain that in a second. So, the way I usually start my covers is I will have the main song itself all out on the timeline in stereo, because normally that's all I've got to work with. But the good thing about the way Hololive does it, or at the very least how this one worked, is I was able to get all the stems. Now, okay, first of all, what are stems for those who maybe don't know music production terms? A stem is basically a bounce down of very similar instruments all grouped together. And that is a stem. And the idea being that if you have all the stems of a song, you put them all together, and you've got every instrument in the song. When you play it back, it will sound exactly like the song. That's the idea anyway. Normally the idea is you would individually master, or you'd batch master all the stems together, so that when they're played back together, it makes the final song. Or you can like do the mastering process on each stem, and then when you combine it all together, that you'll have the song again. It doesn't always work when you factor in beats combining and stuff like that, but it's generally meant to be a case of usually the mix, if you output stems, it gives the mastering engineer a bit more freedom to make adjustments to the mix and more hone in on certain frequencies on a given instrument if that's what's being annoying, because frequency crossovers between instruments happen all the time. So yeah, it just makes it easier for mastering, but at the same time, if for doing remixing as well, it also is very, very handy, especially if you're not doing any hard limiting in your mastering, which means that you can bring everything together much easier. But this is an aggressive genre, so there's hard limiting in this. But yes, the reason how I actually got the stems in the first place is because when this song first came out, there was a competition. The competition being to remix the song. And obviously, by the time I got around to making my cover, the competition had ended. So that's why I decided to try and make good and make sure that I was okay with doing things, that I actually put out an email to Hololive themselves to make sure I had permission to use the stems outside the contest. And you do, basically. In fact, they've even... Now, I don't know if I'm not going to say this happened because of me. There's a very good chance that this happened because they were maybe getting a lot of emails similar to mine. So I'm going to say that. I don't think it was because of me. If it was, I'm both very honored and slightly worried, but I'm very sure it isn't because of me. I'm very, very sure that isn't the case. But yeah, they now actually have a separate FanWorks guidelines for music, which says that you can use all this, and if you want stems, they have a site for them now, which is very, very handy. Potentially. Depends what you're using the stems for, but yes, it's potentially very, very handy. So, if you want to hear what the final version all sounds like, there's the video which you can check out on my channel. But for now, let's just quickly play through. For those who don't know it, this is what the song sounds like.
ミーナさん、今日の楽しいライブ配信に来てくれて誠にありがとうございます。今日もラップしたいと思います。では始めましょうか。
So yes, that's vaguely what the song sounds like. I'm not going to play the whole thing and just sit in silence. That's boring. That's very boring. But you notice it's very quiet. It's very, very quiet. And that's because whenever I output for when I do mastering, I output at a very low level, so I've got lots of headroom. Now, there are upsides and downsides to that, but it's always been my case of try to peak around -10, and then you have control, a bit more control later. But, so yes, what you heard right there is what essentially is what comes out when I'm doing the mastering. It's not fully exactly like that, but it's more or less like that. So the reason why I say it's not fully like that is actually because if I bring this up here, this is the channel strip. Now you can't see it quite because my face is in the way, annoyingly enough. There's never a good place where to put the camera when it comes to this sort of stuff, because everything is kind of needed. So for the time being, in fact, no, what I can do is I can drag this across to here. There we are. God love the fact that it's a window and window application. So yes, as you can see here, I have the master channel here. And this is the last lot that goes out of everything. Now, a lot of these things here aren't normally there at all. A lot of these are things I've added just to simulate what it would be like after I do the final full mastering process. But this is... I'm trying to move away from my old process and try to bring the mastering into Pro Tools instead. Which I know to some people that's going to be like, oh, why would you do that? That's it. But I have my reasons for it. There are future plans I want to do. There are pieces of equipment I want to get. And the idea is that I will do it like this. That this is the way I will do my mastering. So, the way they actually leaves is well, let's go through my mastering chain first. So the first thing I always have on is this. The Solid Bus Compressor. Now, this is basically Native Instruments' take on the SSL, the classic SSL series, G series actually, bus compressor, because the G series was the first console they did to have this bus compressor on. Although the E series was the one that had the first one that had the compression on every channel. So, trivia for you. Yes, this is a very nice thing. It's very much a sort of mixed glue sort of setting. Not quite, though, because as you can see here, I use the Mix Bus preset, and then I adjust the threshold and the makeup gain, just so it's going up a bit. Turns out I now know better settings to put it to, but these are the settings I had it for on the actual release. So as much as these aren't the settings I will use now, after all, keep in mind it's been a few months since I did my cover. In fact, it's been even longer since the video came out, since is when I actually, mixed it in the first place. But yeah, these are the settings I used at the time. What I would use now instead is mainly actually on the release. I would instead have that set all the way to auto instead. Now, the reason for this is just so that depending on how things are going in the song, you may want either a longer release or a shorter release. So basically I'm letting the compressor itself decide what it does. And usually that works well as like a glue to hold everything together. Sure, having a very quick release works as well if you're just trying to manage peaks. But yeah. The other thing is I'd mess more with the threshold a bit more rather than having just peaking a little bit. I'd have it so it's bobbing around 4 dBs of, as this says on his, it says 4 compression. That's not right. It's technically 4 decibels of compression. And that's roughly where I'd have everything set to, because apparently that is ratio for attack at the slowest you can go, which is 30 milliseconds. Makeup gain, sure, if you need it. I tend to leave it off just then I've got headroom. And then threshold you adjust just so you're going around about 4 instead. But that's not how I left it, so I'll put it back to how it was. And you'll notice I didn't actually adjust the threshold. There's the reason for that, and that's because I will forget that I have it set to 0.6. But no, other things I usually have on as well as part of the mastering chain, or at least before I do the actual mastering, is I will have the Omni channel, and I'll have this set, just do some very gentle shifting. I have it set at about 1 kilohertz, 1 dB boost, and that's to give a sort of Neve console-y sound to it. The other thing I have in it is the preamp, where I have it on odd, just so it does a little bit of coloration to it. Not much, that's all I'm going for. And also here, taking down everything below 29 hertz because I don't need it. I'm not going for stupidly super low bass. In fact, in some cases, I actually think I put too much bass into things, at least comparing to quite a few other producers I've heard. But at the same time, for some reason, I did an analysis on some of my mixes, and they seem to lack somewhere between, literally right between 500 to 1K. There's a dip there, which in comparison to other mixes isn't there. So yeah, that's something where apparently to more sound like everyone else, there should be a bit more of a lift there. So that's something I need to work on a bit more. But yes, so I have that. This is just a little thing, small coloration, that's all it's really doing. And here we have the Waves parallel processing. And what this does is a massive, basically it's parallel processing, but just made very, very simple. The idea being that this is a low frequency exciter, this is a high frequency exciter, this works on the transients, and this makes things thick, as the name suggests. So yes, Byte is very much more treble oriented, kind of like a almost like a pre-EQ, but it really emphasizes the attack, so it might even be a transient thing as well. The sub is basically just a sub exciter, and you can select roughly where you want it to be. And because this song is in D, I tuned it down to the D on the bass, which frequency wise is 54.7 hertz. I think that's why it's set like that. I'm pretty sure that's why it's set like that. I usually do that now, so I'm kind of having to remember, so I don't fully know. And then thick is just a thickener. It just makes things just goes, whoa, just nice and thick. And air is high frequencies. So yeah. So yes, this, now that I've got that out of the way, this is how the song actually sounds when I'm exporting it, and I will continue from where I left off roughly.
Fuck it, modern day kills doing let's get fun. More often people taking lives like knives and guns. For being murdered, kind of is in the ruins of hell. Get used to luring the audience, promote itself. Cause to my surprise, session last 40 guys finishing. Nice try, stopping the motherfucking Da Vinci.
Bit closer now, bit closer to how it actually sounds on the thing. So I'll get into the rest of the mastering later. For now, this is basically how the song sounds when it comes out of my DAW system. So let's get into how I actually make the sounds in the first place. So the first part I always start with is drums. And for the drums, I use EZdrummer. And I am quite a big fan of the Black on Blue set, which is very, very nice sounding. Although I do make one change. I don't use the Blue Oyster, the DW Deep Blue Oyster. That is the one that's originally on this. It sounds good, but I like the Blue Selfie instead. It just seems to have like this lower thud. And it seems to have like this more weight in the low ends that I really like. It's got a bit more of this weight, and it feels more in your face, which I very much like. It's like it's got this extra depth to it that, as much as the Blue Oyster does sound very similar, it just doesn't have. And it also sounds like this is tuned lower. I think it hopefully comes across, but yeah, that's why I like that. But everything else is just set to standard. So here we have a Ludwig Black Beauty, the classic. It's the one that sounds great. The Supraphonic is also pretty good. Just depends on what you're going for, really. But I very much like the Black Beauty. It's the go-to, and it's also the default on this, so I like how it sounds, so I want to use it. Tom-wise is the Blue Oysters. Just simple. We've got a 10, 12. This one, I believe, is a 16. Yep, and I think this one's 18. Yeah, it's an 18. Because that's the only 18 you've actually got as part of this pack, actually. So if you wanted other ones, you have to go and look through my other packs. So the other packs I've also got are the Cocktail, which I only ever use as a joke, really. I never actually use it. The Drum Kit from Hell, which I got because of Metalocalypse, and I've never used it. It doesn't work well for me. It doesn't work well for me. It works well in the show, doesn't work well for me. Easy Drummer 2 Modern, I've used that a few times. Same with Vintage. Made of Metal is definitely my favourite. Metal Machine is a good second favourite. To be honest, I like all the metal ones. They just have different varieties. It depends what I'm going for, really. It depends. For me, and for what I do, I like Made of Metal. In the past, I used Metal Machine because it was much more thrashy, and I used to let that call it. In fact, I used Metal Machine for all the Tiras demos I used to do. So that was always that. When Tiras started altering stuff a bit, I went, I think it was it Metal, or was it? No, I clicked the wrong thing there. That's not what I was going for there. It's either Metal or Metal Heads. Oh no, Metal Heads, that's the one. I'd use the was it the Easy Drummer? No, it was not that one. Is it this one? No, it was Metal Heads. Yeah, it was Metal Heads, and I just used basic, and I'd adjust things as I went. For Metal Machine, I used either Distorted or Big Room. Both very, very nice sounding. And of course, Made of Metal, I used Black on Blue. Velvet Tone's also very nice, but I also like Black on Blue. For Metal, Tape, obviously. For Metal Heads, I already said basic or cut through, depends on what I'm doing. Cut through is more down tuning thing. But yes, I have that. But then for the routing on this, I have, as you can see, compression is all the way off, and so is reverb. And I just leave it on the exact same things, but I have it all routed out. And as you can see, I don't use, or at least for this song, I don't use any of the stuff. I write all the drum stuff by hand instead. So when it comes to actually writing the drums, this is what they look like. You have the bass drum, or the kick. You have the snare, or part of the snare. There's another part. That's another part. So different parts of the snare. Here you have one of the floor toms. Got another floor tom. This is one of the rack toms. And this is the other rack tom, if I remember rightly. Yes. That's all the toms, basically. I know in between you've got cymbals and hi-hats and all the other good stuff. But yes, what I'll basically do is I will map out the actual drums of the original song. And then I will metalify them, or in this case, bring in other elements. So, in the original song, there's a bass drum thing that's not a bass drum, a bass sort of synth note. I don't know what to call it. I know what I would define it as, and that's like this sort of bassy, it's not technically bass, but it's kind of like a leady thing, but it has lots of bass to it as well, so it covers for the bass, because the bass doesn't actually play during the sections that this happens. But you'll hear it in the chorus where the bass drum will do some, or the kicks rather, will do some interesting patterns. In fact, if I just solo them up here, we'll solo up the drums and you can hear exactly what I mean before I get into all this stuff I do to the drums. So, if I remember rightly, it's here. Yeah, all those like weird hits and stuff you hear, it works very well because it's metal, but at the same time, the bass drum actually just going boom, 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 like that sort of rhythm. It's not doing anything actually interesting. It's literally there just keeping the rhythm. But of course, this is metal. We can't have that. So what the bass drum is instead doing is it's taking what this... Again, I don't know what to call it per se. It's kind of like... It says it on here that it's got weird names. It says it's bass, but I don't think it's bass. But it does all these weird sounds. You hear it in the original anyway when it comes to the pre-chorus, anyway, which is what this section is. So yeah, basically what I did is I had the audio information there, and I just mapped it out onto what the kick does. Nice and simple. So in terms of what I actually do to the kicks, the thing to know about EZdrummer, or at least with all these presets here, unless you're doing original mix, they all have processing applied. The original mix is literally that. It is the original, just the dry drum kit. But if you use any of the others, you're getting at least some stuff applied to it. Granted, yes, I have still turned it all off here, but there is some stuff still being done to it, I think. I'm not fully sure. But either way, I do a little bit of processing. So for the kick itself, first thing I send it through is the enhanced EQ. This is, again, it says Softube, but this is actually a collaboration between Softube and Native Instruments. And this is actually how I got to know Softube as well. And what they did here is they basically took what is called the Pultec, which is a Valve EQ system, and transferred it into the digital format as best they could, because Softube, as the name would imply, are very good at making tube emulations, shall we say. They've expanded out of that as well now, but they do make very, very good ones. But yes, so what this does is it emulates that piece of gear, and one of the things that gear would do is that if you boost and cut at the same time, in theory it should cancel out, but for some reason, because of the design of the circuit, they don't perfectly cancel out and instead create this ripple effect basically through the EQ that sounds very, very nice and has this sort of thickening effect, especially when dialed up so much. You're driving these, or at least in the original version, you'll be driving the tubes quite hard. But in this case, you know, it's kind of close to that, but not because it's digital. So here what I'm doing is I'm doing the 30 hertz trick, where the idea is you put it to 30 hertz and you have these at roughly the same, but then you adjust them out to taste. And in this case, what I have is I adjust them in equal amounts. So these are based around 6, but then I wanted more boost because it's the kick drum. You want a bit of bass behind it. And so there's a bit more boost than there is cut, so the cut's taken back a bit. And as for this 5 hertz thing, what I'm doing is I'm boosting the actual sound of the beta hitting the skin of the drum head itself. So here I've got it around about 5k. In reality, you can go anywhere between 4k to 8k and you'll get different sounds. But in this case, 5k, I quite like the sound on this a bit more. So we got that, and then obviously the high cut I just don't touch, and neither do the outputs. But the idea here is that it's very narrow and it's only boosting exactly where I want it to. So on the one hand, it sounds artificial, but at the same time, because it's based on a tube circuit, it's also quite natural as well. So you get this wonderful sort of sound from it. Then after that, it goes into, well, quite naturally, the Omni channel. You will see this a lot in what I do. Since I've started using this has become one of my favorite plugins to use, just for the fact of how versatile it really is. Now, don't be wrong, in this all I'm using is the pre and the compressing, because the EQ has already been dealt with. I don't need to do the EQ again. So in here I'm just adding a few odd harmonics, saturating it a little, doing a bit of a what's called thump on this, which kind of is what I think is similar to sound wise to what they do with this when you've got this set up right. But basically all this is doing is it's kind of similar, but it's focusing purely on the bass side So all it's doing is just bass. So all that is a nice 2 dB based, warm, tubey bass bump. It's all that really is. And then I'm compressing with a FET compressor, because FET compression, believe it or not, I really, really like. I like different compressors for different things. Optical, you also got optical here. That's one of the big things about this. You can change which compression type you're using, and you don't have to change settings. So there's FET, VCA. VCA is what you find on consoles, or optical. I quite like FET. FET on, at least on this track, it sounded very nice. But VCA is also, for drums, it's either FET or VCA. Just depends on what I'm going for, really. So yeah, that's how the kick is. It's very simple. Again, I'd probably do a bit more work if I was actually this was a properly recorded kick, but because it's a sample, it means that I can focus more on the tone shaping more than anything else. But even then, if you get the microphone placed right, it will sound exactly like this. Anyway, so next we go on to the snare. First in the snare chain, I have the Vari-Comp. Now, I don't actually know what this is based off, but considering it's soft tube, again, Native Instruments again, this is most likely based on some sort of tube compressor. I know I'm saying tube. I'm British, it should be valve. I should be saying valve. But either way, yes, this is basically the idea on this is it's max input, output's down by quite a bit, threshold is up quite a bit more. Again, that is based off the snare and I adjust it to taste. Very slow attack, very fast recovery though, and a little bit of the dry signal mixing, not much. I mean, the knob will fool you. It says, it just makes it look like there's more dry than there is compressed, but you have to look at the dB for it. The difference is that line there is 0, whereas on the dry, when you pull it all the way up, that's 0. So basically, if you have the dry all the way up, that's at best, and that's up just straight to there. You've got 50-50, basically. That's how it works. But yes, I don't have it so it's detecting high frequencies and stuff like that. But basically, the idea of this is it's just crunchy. I'm making it overload the virtual valves. That's it. I'll say valves because I'm British and we call them valves. So yes, basically the idea is this is overloading the virtual valves and compressing it slightly. I say compressing it slightly, technically because I'm overloading it, I'm compressing it a lot, but you get a big meaty thwack out of it, so it sounds pretty good. Then next, obviously, I have the Omnichannel because obviously, as you can see, it is slightly clipping on the way in, but who cares? As long as it sounds good, who really cares? So again, here I'm mainly doing in this one, I'm doing quite a bit more of the saturation. Again, the idea is really getting that snare to push hard and really sound big. Because, yeah, if you get a snare and you distort it like that, it sounds meaty and thunderous and glorious. And then here, EQ-wise, I'm just doing a lift, 2 bell lifts here. This one is at 1 kilohertz and this one at 4 kilohertz, just below the top peak of the bass drum. But the idea here is that there's a little bit of separation in the hits of them, and it just sounds good. And again, here I'm using optical compression because this is again meant to be very slow. At this point, this compressor is more so to control it and make sure it doesn't go out of control, obviously. But the idea is it's slow, it's warm, so it's very nice. It's very musical sounding, this optical compression thing, and it is very light as well. It's very light. The ratio is actually pretty high. The ratio is at 3.5. It's actually only at -10, which is that's not bad. That's pretty light, to be honest. Fairly medium-ish. Slightly probably too fast from optical, but again, it's more the tone of the optical that we're going for here, not necessarily a full functionality. And then last up here, we have the parallel particles. The idea being that here I'm not adding any sub because you don't need low end in the snare. I mean, you can have low end in the snare, but in this case, I want the low end to come from the kick and the bass. I don't want the snare. So instead, to make up for it, I've got thick. So we've got thick snare, good amount of bites, good amount of top end. Mainly adding in the thick, though, just to make it big sounding. And to be honest, the toms are very much sort of in between the kick and the snare for me, because they kind of act like this bridge gap between the two. So to start things off with this thumb, I've got probably a very similar layout. Mine's what they set to 4 hertz, and if anything, it's actually, I think it's more a lot more aggressive on this, because when you set this EQ like this, it kind of scoops the mids for you, which is quite nice. It means that you can get that thunderous tom and kick sound, which is very nice. But yes, here I'm boosting by 4, just so again there's differentiation between like hitting the floor toms, because again these were the floor toms, all the toms are routed through a stereo channel. Again, I wouldn't necessarily do it this way, but it's how EZdrummer works. Or how, at the very least, how this patch of EZdrummer works. But yes, what it does is it sends it all through, and just by having it so the higher part, the stick attack as it were, is at 4 hertz rather than 5, 4 kilohertz rather than 5 kilohertz, means that you should be able to subtly differentiate between the kick itself and the toms, at least the low toms. The other ones, you're very easy to tell, but the other toms is just so you can really tell the difference. And again, here we have more tonal shaping. I'm just using the pre and the comp. Again, this is exactly the same way I do on the kick. Apparently this time I was feeling fetty. Apparently for this whole thing I was feeling fet more than I was VCA. So again, it's just a case of, for drums I usually minus the snare because I like the optical on the snare. For most of the other stuff, it's usually for me either FET or VCA. Those are my go-tos, with optical usually being for the snare and backing vocals, usually. But again, I didn't do any vocals on this, so there was no need for it. But yeah, it's very similar, just a bit of coloration more than anything else. And then, as per usual, we've got parallel particles here. But here I'm adding a lot more bite, getting a lot more impact out of the toms themselves. A bit more on the low end. As you can see, I'm boosting up quite a bit. We're about 75 hertz. That's usually where you can roughly find a lot of the low end of the toms. And again, by having it at 75 hertz rather than 60, we're separating the bass drum and the toms in the low end as well here. And again, having thick and quite a lot of top end as well, just to make it cut very nicely. Now, as for how I deal with the hi-hats and the overheads, very simple here. I do the exact same on both. These are the exact same presets, just copied across, exactly the same. So I only have to explain one. So in this case, I'm doing the pre, the comp, and the EQ. EQ, again, is just doing that Neve trick, is basically it. Little bit of VCA compression. I was feeling VCA on this, apparently. And again, a little bit of odd harmonics. Not really doing anything with the bass. Actually filtering off quite a bit, just so that then there's room for the regular drums. Now, one of the things that does kind of surprise me here is that I've done nothing to the room or room mono. And this shows the sort of difference I do now, where a lot of the time now with the room, I compress and distort that heavily to really get the drum sound I'm after. And I actually do quite a lot less processing, and definitely a lot less compressing on the individual tracks now. So the idea being that they give the initial transients a very good, strong transient. Bit of tone shaping, obviously, because that's the initial sound. But then the actual overheads, room, and the room mono, that's where you get the sound of the drum kit. That's where you get the tone of the drum kit. And that's the thing I've been experimenting with. Obviously, I didn't do it on here, but I've been experimenting on it. In fact, you actually hear that experimental sound on my video where I did the live production. So we have that there. The one thing that always is lovely is the drum bus. Now here again, I have the SSL bus comp set to a drum bus setting, and effectively, as much as it has the start to suggest I altered things, I didn't. This is just the bass setting. This is how it is, more or less. I may have adjusted things. I don't think I did, but no, I did. Yeah, I put -1 on the output there. That's what I did. That's why it's saying that it's different. Here we have parallel particles again. I reset the whole mix. I have the bottom part tuned to 60 hertz for the bass drum itself. So it's mainly focusing around bigging up the bass drum more than anything else, because that's where we're getting most of the bass from the drum kit from in the first place. And of course, here we have Fresh Air. This is a free plugin from Slate. And I find it very nice and a very easy way to really make sure these cymbals come out nice and defined. But as you can see, it gets very loud, so I've got a trim of -5 decibels. And as much as they're linked, they don't have to be. Yeah, this is more like the mid sort of area. This is the absolute high. And it does sound very nice. And to give you an idea of what the drums actually sound like on their own, and I will bring everything in. In fact, I'll bring them in the order I usually place them as well. So what we will do is we will go like that, we will loop, and we will play. So this is what the drums naturally sound like. So one of the first things I do is I add on the drum bus. Sounds pretty good. Then power particles. You can hear that power coming through now. And then Fresh Air. In contrast, it sounds like I'm taking away a lot of the bass out of it, but that's just, yeah, in comparison. So then what I would then do is I'd go through, first of all, the kick. Feel that thud come out with. That's with just an EQ. And then omnichannel. Really adds that oomph to it. And just because at this point the toms are playing, here we want to put that on the toms. Of course, now the toms stop playing. So we'll get back to the toms. We'll go back to the snare for now. So that on, off, on. Just a bit more. Omnichannel. Bring it out a bit more. Then power particles. Really brings it home. So put this on again, omnichannel. Got that thud coming through. That's what we're going for. Then hi-hat wise, just that's all we're doing. Nice and simple, that's all we're doing. Like that. That's all we're doing. So now we can unsolo all of these. There we are. So the next thing, I'll deal with the vocals last-ish. Next thing we'll go over is the bass, because no one really talks about the bass. So we need to talk about the bass. So bass itself, very, 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 very simple. So if we go across here, in fact, in this case, I actually have to put this back to normal so we can see the bass. Now, this is actually a bass chain system I've been working on for a long time. So get ready, because I've been working on this bass setup here for about a year and fine-tuning it so it sounds perfect. Now, if I remember rightly, there are actually certain things on this I didn't end up using just because it worked anyway. And the other thing to also know is that a lot of these plugins do naturally colour the sound anyway. But anyway, let's get into it. So, first of all, this is what the bass actually sounds like. Let me find a good spot where there's a lot of bass playing. Now that's pretty thick, chunky, distorted, not overly harsh though. And that's the idea. The idea is if I want it to go harsh, the idea is I can dial that in and I can sort of set the aggression level in the song. So on one hand, it could have been set up more, but at the same time, with when you see how the guitars sound, it's probably pretty good that I did it the way I did. So yes. So let's now hear the bass without any of this. Very, very quiet. And that's because I'm using a passive bass. I don't have a very... One second. I don't actually have a very good bass. I have a cheap 5-string I bought secondhand for about £100. It's not very good. The wiring in it keeps falling apart, so I keep re-soldering it just to make it work. So at some point I am planning, I will save up and I will buy a better 5-string. But for the time being, that's the bass I'm using. And I've tried setting up as best I can. I've even repaired it a few times, which I did wrong. But that's a whole other thing. Yeah, sound-wise, it doesn't sound good. It's very bass-heavy, which you kind of want for a bass, but it has no life to it. And you might think, oh, that's just a meme if you don't put new strings in it. It's not. Trust me, nothing makes the bass sound lively, other than a lot of processing. But unfortunately, because I have the amount of processing I have to do, you hear that horrible hissing. Luckily, that gets sort of filtered out by everything else, so you don't hear it. But it's still kind of annoying. But anyway, yes, let's get started. So the first thing that happens to the bass is it goes into Guitar Rig 5. Now, this is actually the free version of Guitar Rig 5. And the only reason... Oh, my foot itches. The only reason I use Guitar Rig 5 and not 6 is just because 5 is where my preset is. The only reason. The only reason. I've slowly started making my preset again in 6. But, yeah. This is just how it goes. So, initially, before it does anything, it gets split. So, channel A has gain reduction. Basically, channel A is clean, channel B is dirty, and at the bottom here, I combine them both together. As you can see, it's currently more over on the clean side than it is dirty. But again, the idea is here, I can adjust things. So, as you can see, it was very mellow sounding, but if I want it more aggressive, on here, I can swap that to an SM57 style, or I can have it down here as an MD41, which is a bit more smoother, and it just generally depends on what I'm feeling. And again, if I'm playing something with a lot of low notes, I can decide whether I want the low shelving in or off. Depends how much I want to really distort those lower notes. Again, it all varies quite a bit. It all depends. It all changes. But yes, in its current state, channel B is very simple. It's very much a case of, it's actually the Lemmy bass settings of preamp max, master at, well, 6, presence at 7. The master would normally be at 7, but I left it at 6 just because it worked. Preamp at 10, bass, surprisingly at 4, all the mids, and treble also around about 4. Again, presence I already said around about 7. The idea here being that we're trying really, as much as we want a good amount of top end sizzle, so that again, if I swap that like that, we get a lot of crunch. We've got a lot more aggression out of it. At the same time, we want the distortion to be very mid-focused and kind of take away from the bass and the treble. But again, we still want that high fizz, hence the presence. And again, that just fills out to low. If I want it to be a bit more cleaner when I go for the low B string, all that really is. And here we have basically it being a case of noise reduction, because this was all recorded on my old Behringer desk, which was very noisy with, especially with DI inputs, loads of hiss and noise. Luckily, the Focusrite, much cleaner, but regardless, that will still say, just for the fact of I have to turn up that bass very loud, so there's naturally going to be hiss, and this gets rid of it, so might as well. Then we compress slightly. This is, if I remember rightly, just, it might even just be default because it worked, it sounded good, so I just left it. The EQ I did obviously change. A good healthy boost around 1 kilohertz, just to really, that's a good frequency to let the bass really shine and poke out, so keep that in mind. And get rid of quite a lot of the mud around about 400 hertz. And here we have a general sort of take out the high end, boost the bass sort of thing, because really that's kind of where we want it to be. We don't really need any more of the high end there. And here we just mix it together. So to give you an idea of what I mean by how it would sound like if I was to adjust the slider, if I unbypass this, I can let the bass play. Once it gets to a point where it will actually play. So that's pretty good. If I adjust this over, You can hear that, that's a bit more poking. Whereas that's a bit more smoother. That's the sort of thing I mean. It's like, it's pretty much, I have this where I can dial it in. Is like that. And then I've also got this where I can fine tune it so I can go more this side if I want even more aggression. Or this side if I want it cleaner. Which is very nice as well. Downside is, someone stop playing. There we go. Downside is that because this is an older version, this is why I'm going to make the move to 6. Again, this is actually just a free version of 6, of 5 and 6 anyway. The whole idea is that in an ideal world, this control here and this control here would be automated outside in Pro Tools itself, but I can't currently do that. 5 doesn't actually allow you to do that. It allows you for MIDI in, but I haven't been able to get it to work, so I think I may need to look into some things with that, because it really wants you to make use of the foot controller, but, you know, I don't use the foot controller. I use the free version of this, because, I mean, I'd love the full version, but the free version sounds really good as well. It's kind of one of those underrated amp sims that is very, very good and sounds very good, but people don't really seem to talk much about it, because Native Instruments is very much... They market themselves very much more in the case of like samples and DJs and stuff like that. They don't really market themselves much as being an actual good place to get some, maybe not the most authentic plugins, maybe not. I've never really seen anyone talk about it per se, but I like the sound of them, so I use them. Simple as. But anyway, yes, that's the first part of the bass. So, continuing on from there, we have the TDR Nova, and this is essentially a reactive EQ. I say reactive EQ, essentially it's kind of a compressor, but a banded compressor where you control exactly where the compression happens. So in this case, I'm controlling a not very nice frequency around 150 hertz, and just dealing with it because there's a nasty peak that's pointing up. Again, we don't need low end below around, well, definitely not below 30 hertz because it's just not needed. And I can shelf off quite a lot of the high end to make it sit nicer in the track. And again, a little bit of just a peak of around 1 kilohertz. But what this does is it's reactive. So you won't actually ever hear this go down, because as you can see, this bump is higher than the actual fundamentals. So if I activate it, the idea is that it just controls it. So out, you see the fundamental usually around here is much higher. As the waveform gets to here, it goes down. That's generally the idea of what I go for here. So yes, that is that. Doesn't really do much. Very simple EQ. Here we have the supercharger. This is now free from Native Instruments. This is again a valve style compression, but it's very simple. One knob, and you kind of go. It's basically the more you turn it up, the more it compresses. It's a one knob compression, and you've got extra punch, which slows down the attack time, and dirt, which adds some saturation. And it sounds good. And you've got input trim, so everything lines up nicely. So this is without, this is with. As you can see, I have it tuned for the 4 strings, or at the very least the E string, which in this case is tuned down to D. But I've got it tuned, the input trim tuned to that. So on the one hand, yes, when I go for the low B, there's a lot more energy there. So it does go above the trim input, but at the same time, this just compresses it more anyway. And the idea is it's between -4 and -8, just so it's very consistent, and a very consistent low end that's just there, which is generally what you kind of need. At the end, the dirt's just there just to add a bit of character. And that's basically that. It's a very nice, very easy compression. Like I said, this is free as well, so it's very nice and easy to use. Before, I got this as part when it was part of a Honolulu bundle. Again, there's the bigger version of this, which I would also like to get because it's I like tweaking things. But this is also a very, very nice compression. It works. What more can I say? It works, and it lets you do barrel compression as well if you want. It's a very simple compressor. And again, it just works. It just works. Here I have the enhanced EQ. Here, well, as you can see, very, very, very simply, what I'm doing here is I'm doing the boost and the cut trick again, because again, it sounds good. And I'm boosting again at 1 kilohertz. You already know what it does. I just like how it goes from, you know, kind of weakish to nasty, yeah. I mean, to give you an idea, even just at this point, that, plus on this, switching that up to here, you see how it's got that bit more aggression in the sound. But for me, that didn't work in this, so I left it as it was. And that bass is getting close to the end of the song, so we'll quit back here while we... No, wrong button. Control that one. There we go. Okay, so here back we are. Next, as you can see, parallel particles. And again, this is just general shaping of the sound. But not really changing the color or the tone. This is just making it bigger, making it stand up a bit more to the other instruments because, again, my bass is very quiet. And then we have the... Why is this here? Yeah, why is this here? Oh, I know what this is. Yes, I know what this is. This was never actually used, but this is here. But yeah, I never actually no. Oh no, it's used. It's because in bypass it doesn't say. So yeah, what this does is it doesn't actually do anything apart from whenever the bass drum hits, the bass is effectively turned down around 60 hertz, so that the kick, the full transient in the kick and the low end from the kick is allowed to come through, and the bass basically takes a breather for a second, but the bass is allowed to keep playing, so we still get the high frequency, and basically it just means that we get a bit extra space. This is the way that track spacer from Waves Factory effectively works, but this is basically a lot more of a basic way of going about it. This is the bread and butter of going about it, rather than having a plugin to do it for you. This is how you do it. You find the frequencies that are clashing, and you literally listen to it, and you take it out. And that's what that does. There's not really much point playing it, because twice you don't really hear it. It's more a thing that you hear in the full mix when you go and the bass drum hits, and you're just thinking, whoa, way too much bass. That's basically it. It's basically just a method to keep it under control. That's all that is. So now let's get to the guitars, which is the part which people very, very, very much like. And for me, the guitars are very, very simple because, again, I've managed to really refine this down. So we'll start with the rhythm guitars. So this is without. This is fully without. This is what the guitars on their own just sound like, the rhythm guitars. And you have to admit, that's pretty solid. That's pretty nice and solid tone-wise. So all that is my Thrasher amp with two microphones in front of it, into the Behringer, mixed on the Behringer into a mono signal, and recorded into this. Now, unfortunately, the Behringer doesn't work anymore, so I can't get the sound of that board for now. But the idea is you can buy a 2-channel, much cheaper version of it, which I will then just plug into the back of the Focus right here. And then that'll be my guitar channels. Very simple. I would literally just have to pull that out, plug it in, and away I go for this kind of guitar sound. So when it comes to guitars, it's very much a case of I try to get right at the source. I want to get as good a sound as I can get at the source, and then I will give it a few days, I'll record everything else, and then I'll come back to it and then make it how I want it to sound in conjunction with everything else. So, as I said, that's how the guitars sound. And you're probably thinking, that sounds pretty good. What really do you need to adjust? Well, first of all, we need to do what I refer to as corrective room EQ. And obviously that's because the guitars were recorded in my room. Now, my room is just my bedroom. So, yeah, it's not an ideal recording place. Now, luckily, it's not too bad. My room is very much kind of, it's not even. Waves can't propagate easily. I have stuff in here because it's where I sleep. It's where I keep my stuff. So naturally, there's lots of stuff here. Lots of clothing and stuff. There's stuff there's my desk and stuff. Just general stuff that breaks up the waveforms. So it does help quite a bit. The actual reverb time isn't too bad in here. It's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. It's not nowhere near. It's not 1.5 seconds like you'd want for a live room. It's also not 0.2 millisecond, 0.2 seconds, which you'd want for your control room. If I had to guess, I'd probably say it's around 0.5 to 0.4, somewhere between there. That's probably what the reverb time is, because it's not dead. It's a natural sounding reverb, but I've heard bigger. I've definitely heard bigger. But at the same time, it's not dead. Especially if you go up a bit more where there's less stuff, the reverb becomes more intense. Hence why I record, well, it's not actually not the reason I record the Bob 2 speakers, but it just happens to be a happy coincidence as to why that happens. But yes, so the idea is that each room has nodes in it that you want to take out. And generally speaking, I try not to bother with nodes that are close near the fundamental, like the actual fundamental range of the instrument. I'd much rather deal with the ones that are near the overtones, because then you can hide them a lot more easily. Now, generally with a guitar, I'm close miking it anyway, so I don't have to worry that much about the room harmonics towards the lower end. Just is a thing I don't have to worry about. If I was like doing ambient miking, say for example like an overhead or a distant microphone, then I would have to worry about it, and that would have to be a thing. But generally I would only do something like that in a treated room anyway. And to be honest, most of the time when it comes to recording guitars, what I'm actually doing is I put a blanket in front of the cab, and that kind of helps to kill a lot of the room sound. Doesn't kill all of it, but it definitely helps clear up a lot of the lower end ones. But yes, over time I've learned that you can't make a preset for room nodes. You just can't make a preset for them. You can roughly know the characteristics of your room, but then you also have to realize that the microphone has its own characteristics, and if you're using multiple microphones, those characteristics combine, especially if you're doing what I'm doing and putting them into a single audio signal. So I always use two nodes here. I have my low node at 433 Hertz, and you can usually guarantee that you'll find the next node around double the low one. So you find the low one first. Actually, it doesn't really matter which way you go, actually. You find one of them first, and depending on which one it is, you kind of either half or thing is. Now, you can also go more, like I could add another node, and in this case, it would be closer to around 1.7 kilohertz. But at that point, you're essentially, it's becoming a comb filtering effect. You don't want to use too many. You want to keep this sparse. It's cleaning. It's not, you're doing minor tweaking and cleaning. You're not completely drowning the thing in bleach. Basically, you're not destroying it. You only want to tweak the most notable ones, so then you've still got room character, but it's not annoying. So to give you an idea of how this sounds, I will unmute that and stick that to mono. So, and we will toggle this on and off. So this is obviously without. Then with. You see how it like focuses all the sound and it really brings it to the forefront of your attention, even though we're taking stuff away. And it really sort of sounds, it makes it sound way more aggressive as well, which I very much like. So, basically, that's what that's there for. Now, you also notice these other things I haven't mentioned yet. Those are frequency shelves. The idea being that what those are there for is to force the guitar into a frequency band. And in this case, it's very much kind of mid-ranging. So, we already have the bass and the kick drum handling the bass. The guitar doesn't handle the bass. Therefore, anything below, generally below about 80 to 100 hertz, it's not needed. Now, the actual fundamental frequency of a guitar tuned to standard tuning is around 82.4 hertz, if I remember rightly. I'm probably very wrong on that, but that's the number that sticks in my head. But I found that 100 hertz works very well as well, especially if you're really trying to get a very tight tone. So usually it's a case of, for clean, I go 80, for distortion, I go 100, and I let the bass pick up a bit more of the slack of the missed out frequencies that the guitar is missing, basically. And for the high end, it's just to get rid of quite a lot of that too much air, like higher air frequencies will clash with the cymbals, and you don't want that, or at least I don't want that. And yeah, that's all it really does. And then here you see on the outputs I've added about a decibel, the idea being that then by doing this EQing I've taken away energy, so to replace that energy I then boost everything back up a little bit, just a tad, just to match the volumes, nothing more, nothing less. It's just to balance it out. And that's all that is there for. And that's all that's actually on the individual channel, because I know reasons. For some reason, I didn't think about just putting it on the actual group channel, which does make sense. But either way, I've done it this way for some reason. I've done it this way for reasons. Probably it was to do with tracking, but yeah. But yes, like I said, this is how they sound now. That's without that. That's with. Now you get the idea. Now, the next things I do is I have the Omni channel. I told you you'd be seeing it a lot. Here, if I unbypass it, we're doing a little bit of the pre stuff. Here, we're getting rid of quite a... Not here. Here, we're just we're just controlling everything below 200 hertz. The idea being that that's where palm mutes can really jump out. So we're just bringing that under control. It's basically like you've got a multi-band compressor. But in this case, I have two bands and I can adjust how they react. In this case, I am focusing purely on everything below 200 hertz. Just to, like, really get rid of it, basically. That's all I'm doing. Just everything below 200 hertz, gone. Just to keep it under control. That's all we're going for here. Then EQ-wise, to gain out a little bit of the low end, because again, we don't need it. It's a guitar. We've got the bass for that. And doing the Neve EQ trick of 1 dB at 1 kilohertz, just to give that little boost. That's a setting on this, by the way. That only applies to this plugin. It's designed to do that on these settings. Probably doesn't do it on other ones. If you really want the Neve sound that bad, just buy a Neve plugin. It's probably the best way to go about it. Or a Neve-based plugin, rather. And then here I'm just giving a little bit of a 1 dB boost around about 8,000 kilohertz, just to really dial it in, sort of thing. But yes, I've also got to set this to duo, just so they actuate differently on the two guitars, because the two guitars are panned hard left and right, just to get that wide sound. And then for the guitar trick, again, you know how it goes. We have this. Now, in this case, I'm actually cutting more than I'm boosting. Again, we don't need that much bass. All we need is the effects that this plugin provides. In fact, no, I didn't even show what it sounds like with this on. So this is like this. I think it just controls it a bit, makes it a bit warmer sounding. Then we bring in this. And that, as far as I'm concerned, that plugin takes the guitar tone from pretty good to the sound in your head, like that massive crunch rock star sound that you probably have. It's like that's perfect. That's perfection in tone as far as I'm concerned. At least it is for me. Probably not for everyone, but for me it makes me very happy. And to give you an idea, this is what it is in conjunction with the bass. Without. That's what I mean by the bass does. The bass is the unsung hero of metal. It really is what... It's literally what gives metal its heavy. And yet everyone's always saying like, oh, the bass player is the one that's like the bad guitarist. It's like, no, you don't understand. Bass is super important. A bad bassist is the bane of every engineer because they haven't a clue what they're doing. So yes. So yes, now we'll move on to the harmony guitars, and these were done very differently. As you can see, they're not done on a bus. Instead, they are two separate channels. I don't know why I did it this way. I just did. But here's what these sound like when I find a part where they're playing. Now, the first thing you notice is they're playing different things. And that's just a harmony thing I like to do. Just have the guitars play different things. So yeah, the reason why these are different is because my amp was actually on the clean channel with just a little bit of grit. But the way I actually got that really nice sort of smooth sort of lead tone is actually using a pedal. Now the pedal I used is actually the Marshall Governor Mark II, which is really weird because it's been a pedal which I've had before. It was one of the first pedals, if not the first pedal, I bought for myself. But at the time, I couldn't get it to work right for me. I didn't fully understand the difference between an overdrive and a distortion. So it was very early for me. So I ended up taking it back and replacing it with a overdrive instead when I had a bit more money. Because I just couldn't get the thing to sound right, because I wanted, like, why would I use the clean channel when I've got the overdrive channel? And sure, if I put this in front of it, it'll sound even better. And it didn't. It sounded like a fuzz, and that wasn't what I was going for. Nowadays, it's very useful for doing stuff like that. But, yeah. So, fast forward to, well, basically now. And, yeah, I managed to get the pedal back because it was a present for Christmas. Turns out they stopped making it. So, if you've got one and you're thinking of getting rid of it, they're kind of worth a bit now. What was like a £50 pedal, if that, is now worth quite a bit, apparently. Unless you can get it for a good price. So if you want that sound, you kind of hard pushed. You have to find a clone. You have to find a clone of the Governor Mark II. And yeah, so good luck. But yeah, this sound is that into my Thrasher on the clean mode, on the clean channel basically, which is the clean channel on the Randall is basically a much more controllable kind of voxy sort of sound. That's how I've got it set right now. In the up position on the three-way shift, it's very much like a Vox. In the down position, it's more like a Fender. In the middle, it's kind of like a Marshall-y sort of sound. It's a more mid-heavy clean, but if you put it up a bit more, it's more mid-heavy and we get a bit more gain in it. So Marshall-y sort of Voxy sort of sound. You know, if you crank the clean channel on that and stick a boost in front of it, it sounds very much like Queen. So that's why I say it's more Voxy to me. It's got that sort of tonal quality to it, which is very nice. And then also the distortion side of the Thrasher, just because I've not mentioned it yet, is very much based off a sort of Marshall JCM 800 kind of thing. Except it's a lot tighter sounding for more modern metal. It doesn't have that sponginess to it. It's very... In fact, if it wasn't it feels very fast, so it's very solid statey in that regard, but it's also got that tube sound to it. And in the up position, it's very martially. In the mid position of the three-way switch, it's kind of European-ish. It's kind of what comes to mind when I think Engel. It's that sort of sound. And then when you push it down, it's very thick like a boogie. I use it in the up position. I like the Marshall position more. But I will also say that the other ones do have their place, and I do like the sound of those as well. It's just for what I generally tend to do, I use it in the up position because I like that. So yes, very Marshally sounding is how I like things. And maybe I should just buy a Marshall. Things to consider. But yes, back to the Harmony guitars. They sound like this. Now these are recorded in the exact same way, same mics, so I don't need to say anything about this. It's exactly the same because it's the exact same setup. I didn't move the microphones while I was doing all this. So now they sound like this. A lot more direct. But that sounds a bit more looser. A bit more direct in the sound is what we're doing there. That sort of shaping. Up next here we have, as per usual, you're going to get sick of seeing it, the Omni channel. And once again, it's doing a very similar thing as it was doing before, except on here I don't need to worry about lower frequencies. Instead, here I need to worry about higher frequencies because that's what I'm playing in. So here it's just I'm dealing with mud around about 400 hertz, as per usual. And here, yeah, about 7 hertz. There's a lot of horrible hiss that you can get. Usually if I'm doing rhythm stuff and I'm going up high on the fretboard as well for the rhythms, then I'll engage this as well. But I use it on a case-by-case basis, on a case of, is it needed or is it not? And if it's not needed, I don't put it in. That sort of thing. More saturation on this than before. I'm using the compression on the FET. I like FET on guitars. I very much like the FET setting on guitars. So you'll probably find I do that a lot. And EQ wise, I'm getting rid of quite a lot of the high end just to make sure it's not too harsh. Same here. A lot more doing the mids trick again and get rid of the bass. So it's very much a case of I'm focusing it around the mids instead. So that's generally what I'm going for here. Taking out a little bit in the mids, a lot of the high. Generally just trying to smooth out the sound a bit. So obviously without, then with. Again, the idea for this was very fluid sounding, is kind of the best way I can describe it. And then once again, we have this little trick, which again, just sounds good. Brings it forward again. So that's the harmony guitars. There's actually quite a few guitars. And then here we have, ooh. Yes, we also have a doubler. So this is where I actually started getting to some of the effects. One of the effects I used on this is a doubler and also a delay. So this delay is actually it's a delay and a reverb, but we'll get into that in a second. First, we'll go into the doubler. So this is meant to be a vocal doubler, but I like to have it on 100% variation, 0% variation, effect only, and you mix it in. And it just sounds really, really nice on guitars. At least on my Jack's Metal doubling preset, which is literally a case of take separation, crank it up, and don't touch anything else. Because it's a one dial thing. So yeah, I just leave it back like that. And so this is easy to go in and out with. So without, with. Now, the idea for that is it's more to be that it's kind of like a chorus, but not swirly. It's not, the idea is I'm not going for swirly, I'm just going for movement, basically. It's kind of the idea of what if I had a chorus and turn the rate all the way down, but a good amount, but then just alter the depth to how I like it. That kind of thing is what I'm kind of going for here. But at the same time, the vocal doubler sounds a bit more natural and interesting because it's meant, again, this is a vocal doubler. It's meant to be used for vocals. It's much more convincing on vocals. On guitar, it kind of breaks and doesn't work right. And I kind of like how that sounds. It sounds interesting. It sounds different, basically. Because again, if I play it... It doesn't quite work right, but it works in a way that I like, basically. That's the easiest way I can describe it. It works in a way I like. And then we have the reverb. Now, the reverb, well, I say reverb, the delay reverb. So this is the CLA Echosphere. This was a free thing, which they released as part of... it's not free anymore, unfortunately, but they did release this for free, literally just to kind of promote the bigger version of this. But it's very useful. It's a reverb and a delay. Ooh, someone's done something. This isn't updating. Why isn't it updating? 1 second. Let's see what OBS is saying. Because I can't see. And it's gone. I can't see. Wonderful. All it says... I think some of this stuff needs to be updated because I can't tell what's going on. I think it's not a follow, so I'm going to guess someone hosted me. Just because for some reason the hosts never show up, even though they're meant to. Right, you know, all the host things are meant to show up, but they never do. So I'm going to say thank you for the host. I'm guessing it's the host. Because I've got nothing else to go on. I've literally got nothing else to go on, so I'm sorry. I think it's the hosting. So, but yes, yeah, I think something's broken in my OBS. Anyway, back to what I was saying before with the Echosphere. So, yes. So what this does is it's a delay and a reverb in one box essentially. But the thing you can do with this is you can set it so the delay trails are the only thing that goes to the reverb, rather than it be that the reverb gets both the original signal and the delay. You can choose to just send the delay to it, and I quite liked that in this regard. So good thing is I have faders on here I can mute and unmute. So if we just go just to delay, this is what the delay sounds like. It's very, very, very quick, apparently. Is that not sending to the right output? I might not be sending that to the right output. That's a very real chance I'm not sending that right. Oh, no, it is. Okay. Why is this not working? Or does the whole thing just need to be on? Why is this not working? Yeah, the whole thing needs to be on. Okay. Crisis avoided. I can't just show you off what one thing does. The whole thing needs to be on. But yes, you can hear it does. Just helps carry things on a bit. Add a bit more depth, space, sort of thing. That's kind of what this thing is meant to be for. It's meant to be adding for adding depth and stuff. But yes, as much as it says it's a slap delay, it's not. You can adjust the timing to be longer. It sounds nice. I have other ones which I also like more, but I do also like the reverb in this. But this does also work very nicely just for the harmonies, just because it's one plugin that just works and you just go. So it's very nice in that regard. Again, that was free. Unfortunately, it's not anymore. You kind of missed it. So, sorry. You have to buy it now. So yes, that's the harmony guitars. Now we'll go for the extra guitars. Now, this is fun. Extra guitars aren't something I add very often, but when I do, I like to have fun with them. So, this is what this guitar sounds like with nothing else on it. very different from everything else I've got in the track. So, this was made by having the distortion channel on my amp with my Marshall boost, my Marshall Governor distortion in front of it, and then controlling the gain on both. So I just got something that's nice and fizzy, kind of broken sounding, but usable and musical. So I got this sound. So it's very, very broken sounding. And once again, we do the room corrective EQ just to focus it a bit more. Then this just to like sort of help it a bit more. This was more so a case of the high end of it was sticking out, poking out a bit too much, which I wasn't quite liking. But overall, I still very much like the sound of it. And a fun thing, this guitar plays the exact same thing as what the bass does here. So this is something I'll get into just after this as well. There's actually a 2-octave gap between them. So the bass is playing really low. The guitar's actually playing fairly high, like an octave higher than the other guitars. And also the bass is an octave lower than a guitar is normally. So because the guitar's playing higher than normal, but the bass is playing normally, it means that we have a 2-octave split between the two. So it effectively sounds like I've got this weird effect on the bass, but I don't. It's actually a separate guitar. So yeah. So yeah, we have that. Very, very nice. It does a similar sort of thing here as well. There we are, ending. So yes, the thing I'll point out is that the bass actually plays different things in the pre-choruses. So this is what the pre-chorus sounds like normally, or at least this one does. So also, you can't hear it too well, but what the guitar's doing there is it's doing arpeggios. So what arpeggios are, if I don't know, I'm trying to gauge whether people know this or not, but we'll see. Basically, an arpeggio is you take a chord, you break it up, you play each note one at a time, and go back and forth. You arpeggiate it. You go up and down the chord, and of course, the more complex the chord, you can do interesting rhythms with it and all this other stuff, and yeah, generally it can be quite interesting, to say the least. But just having the bass do that, I mean, for the most part throughout all this, the bass kind of follows what the guitar does. Now, in actuality, what I do with the bass is I have it play something between the rhythm of the rhythm guitars and the kick drum. Or, well, in general, the drum itself, but mainly the bass and the kick drum and the snare. Sort of, I'll have it do an approximation between the rhythm that's doing versus what the guitar's doing and do something in the middle that kind of glues them together. That's the kind of thing I usually go for. But one of the things that I found with this song is that it's very repetitive. Apart from the verses, the pre-chorus and the chorus in the original song only stay on G, because this entire song is in the key of G. That's why I tuned down to D. It's music theory things, but yeah, basically G to D is like a fourth, and I like the sound of fourths, and it's something I can very easily bounce off, and it works very well. So I do stuff like that. Rather than tune down to drop G, because that's too low. Instead, I tune down to drop D, and then the G is a nice fourth between from the D, you go up to the G, and you can bounce off it very well, very nicely, and it means that you can keep all the same notes in the song, but then add in those low chugs as well, and it works. At least it seems to. It has done so far. I've yet to find the thing where that hasn't worked with yet. But yes, so just to break it up a little bit more, so the bass is doing more of its own thing. Not so much coming out in the spotlight, because that's what the harmony guitars are doing. They're in the spotlight for that section. But just so the bass is doing something different and interesting, and so we've got a different rhythm going on, is I had the bass do something completely different entirely. So in the first time round, what the bass is doing here is, so the notes to this, if I remember rightly, they start off with G, they go to C, then B sharp, and then A, then the turnaround. So what I did here is I had the bass actually just bounce from, because like I said before, I have a 5-string bass, so I've got the E string, I've got the 4 strings which go E, A, D, G, but then below that I've got a low B string. Now the idea is for what I did for that B string is I usually reserve that low B for doing interesting things, like stuff you wouldn't normally think of. So for the most part, my songs play fairly well on a 4-string bass, until I decide, you know what, let's really do something interesting. And I've got that left loop mode. There we go. So yeah, what I will then tend to do is I will incorporate the low B in such a way, just to vary something up. Sort of stuff like, a bit of water. Hydrate. So yes, what I'll do is on the low B, what I'll do is, especially if I'm down tuning quite a bit, where I have the song in a drop tuning, I will also drop the B down to an A. So then I goes A, D, A, D, G. And that will be the tuning of the bass. What that allows me to do is take anything I'm doing on any of the A and D strings, and I can move them onto any other of the A and D strings, just to add variety. Now that's generally how I tend to go about things. In this case, I want to do something interesting. So what I did is I took the fact that I like fourth harmonies quite a bit, which, by the way, even the harmony guitars are playing in fourths. They're very far away fourths, but they are playing in fourths. I mean, technically, if at that point, with the notes being so far away, it's not technically fourths, but if you were to write down the notes that are being played, they are based around fourths, effectively, and then just moved around in the octave just to sound interesting. Yes, I did the same on the bass. I just had to reflect the fourth thing on the bass as well. So the bass actually plays down to hit that low note. So it does that instead. It goes down, as you will hear. But originally it was going da dun dun da dun 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 dun, and I realized I'm hitting more of the like extra note than I am the actual root note, and that's not what the bass is actually meant to be doing. So I flipped the pattern around, and instead we get this. Although actually I just realized I was wrong. It's fifths that the bass is doing here. Either way, fifths are actually a lot more common. It's what you tend to do on the piano with your left hand. Yeah, on the piano on the left hand, you're more likely to play fifths and then build up the rest of the chord with your right hand. That's how pianos go. But yes, that's basically what that's doing. It's bouncing off the fifth. Just to be interesting, that's all it is. Now for the other one, this is where I decided to go, let's just have some fun. So, what the bass is doing here, I actually wrote on the extra guitar first. So, and the way I got that is actually from the harmonies. So, if you listen, when it comes to the parts where the harmonies do like their main trill sort of thing, it actually fully harmonizes. So, we play it through. So yeah, I basically, and that I tried to stay around one key area. So it's higher up than everything else, but it's also lower than the actual harmony guitars. So it's like this nice bridging area that's really broken and distorted, just to add this interesting texture to it. And then I decided to have the bass double that. Well, in the bass's normal register, which is 2 octaves below what the extra guitar is actually doing. So together, all 3 of these make this sound. Which is how I got that. Now, you can't hear it very well, and that's kind of by design. It's meant to be something interesting that you pick up on. Although, spoilers, I've just revealed it. But, yeah, I like adding interesting stuff like that. And that same thing repeats here when the extra guitar plays again. And again, what the extra guitar is doing here is based off what the harmony guitars are also doing here. Which I know it doesn't sound like it, but what basically the idea is I take what the sort of rhythm that I was doing before and interpolate it roughly around a similar sort of movement in the notes as to what the harmony guitars are doing. The idea being here that the harmony guitars are basically following that third, what I call like the third sort of riff, which is kind of here-ish. Like that. They're basically basing themselves around that. At least at the start they are. And I took that same sort of idea and basically took that same kind of note position information and kind of spliced it with what the guitar was doing before. And then I had the bass do the same. It's, I don't even fully know how my mind works. I just come up with ideas. Basically, the way I usually work is I come up with ideas and I explain the theory to them later, or I work out the theory to them later. It's very much a case of I will make the thing and I will make it work in theory later. But, so yes, that's the extra guitar and the extra things about the bass. Now the lead guitar. Look, the lead guitar's easy. Lead guitar's very, very, very easy. So we'll start off with stuff again. This is what the guitar sounds like on its own. So as you can hear, I use a wah pedal because I don't use wah pedal that often. It's really weird. In my covers, I don't use a wah pedal, but every time I play live, I use a wah pedal because I love the wah pedal. I love the expression it can give to your notes when used right. That is, not when it's used right, it can. Although it's also very funny if I'm doing how to do a funk cover, because then it's just like, it's just so much fun. It's very easy, and it makes everything sound good if you're doing funk, basically. But in this case, yeah. It also, at this point, the mix is very dense. So, as you can see, that all the guitars are playing at the same time here. So, along with the vocals and everything. So, to really help that really punch out, using the wah really helps focus the guitar to the forefront a little bit more. Again, extra focusing. And then about this for control. And this focuses it way more on like the high end sort of sound. If I put it back here. And then we've got this again to make it sound good. And that's what the lead guitar is doing. So if we go back to the very start here, you'll see I actually have this long intro thing that the guitar does. And this is just me making the guitar feedback. At this point, I haven't actually hit the strings with my pick. Until here. Here's where I actually start picking. There we are. And then it just holds. And then ends. So yeah, that's all the lead guitar does. Normally I would include a solo in the song, but because this is a song from Hololive, I really didn't want to adjust it that much as I did add all this extra thing at the beginning. I didn't want to adjust it too much from the structure, entirely because I really wanted to pay homage to the original. I really wanted to like show that this is a cover. I'm not doing a remix or anything like that. This is very much meant to be a cover more than anything else. So again, that's why I didn't change much there. So now coming on to one, actually no, extra thing with the lead, which I completely forgot. The modulation and the delay. So for the lead itself, the delay wise, I'll turn off the modulation. I really like this, which is called Replica. This is very much a favorite delay of mine, and I would really like to know what they based this on so I could buy it, because I really like this delay. It sounds really nice. I've got it set to a filter, and vintage digital on a crunch quality, so essentially a really bad digital delay, like a really old one, but I just like how it sounds. Full mix, obviously ping pong, because then you get going like stereo. You'll hear in a second. Goes side, that side, that side, that side, and it goes like that sort of thing. And again, this is just the main focus of the delay for this is meant to be that whole imagery of the guitarist on the side of the mountain. He hits the note and it just resonates forever, sort of thing. That's kind of the thing you go for there. But then also to make it sound interesting and add movement to the sound itself, we have the actual modulation. But I will first show you it without. So this is obviously without. And you can see it adds a nice tail to the end of the song, just so you've got that something that you can use to end it, sort of thing. But to add movement to the sound, I have this. This is Phasis. Can you tell I'm a fan of Native Instruments yet? Yeah, this is Phasis. This is a phaser, which I have set on the classic stereo mode. And again, this is just to add movement to the sound. I have it set to 4 notches, which is the sort of thing you would actually hear on a Phase 90 by MXR, which is again something I actually have on my pedal board. So the idea in this is that it's rendered in just enough to add movement. I actually set my Phase 90 differently than I do in this, because in this I've got the mix. I can mix it in more using the faders, so it does sound different on this than I would normally do it. If anything, this is kind of similar to the sound I would get if I was to turn my phaser on and the chorus I have in the loop of my amp when I'm playing live. So this is kind of the sound I get with that. But in this case, I'm doing it like this. And it'll be interesting to like try them side by side and see which one sounds like what. That'd be an interesting let's try at some point, but regardless, this is how I do it on this. And again, it just sounds interesting. Again, makes it pop out a bit more. And keep in mind, this is a very dense area of the song, so it needs all the help it can get. So, last real thing to talk about is the things from the original song. So, as I said before, these are all stems from the original song. That's why there is no original track at the top, because I was using the stems, and the stems became part of the song itself. So this plug thing is actually heard at the start of the original song. So, wait for that to pass. Of course, I've done nothing to it. just because I didn't want to be bothered trying to do that tape stop sound. I couldn't be able to do that. I didn't want to try and learn the thing on guitar. And I liked the idea of it building from the original song into my cover. So, yeah, there's that. So we have that. Let's go for, where's stem effects? Oh yeah, this is in the breaking. Here we have the brass and the pluck, which is literally what you hear in the sound where everything else drops out in the song. And then, of course, my guitars come back in. So that gets... That's a very simple passing moment you can easily miss. So there's that as well. And then here at the end, we have a stem thing here. Of what I'm guessing it sounds like a penny dropping. I think it's a penny dropping, but I decided that's a nice callback to the song. Leave that in. It's like, yep, it's ended. Sort of thing. It's that kind of thing. So now, let's get to the actual vocals. So this is the vocals from Callie's song, but completely isolated from the rest of it. So yeah, it's completely separate from the original song. And this is really useful because then you don't have to worry about bleed from anything else. This is as the vocals are in the actual song, which is very, 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 very helpful. But as I think gets shown up somewhere around here.
Fuck it, modern day killers really must take fun. More often people taking lives, rocking knives and guns. The real murder connoisseur is in the ruins of hell. Get used to luring the audience with more success. Cause to my surprise, snatch your last 40 eyes, can't she? Nice try, stopping the motherfucking Da Vinci of human.
They've already been processed. Now, if I take off my processing that I added to it, this is what it actually sounds like.
Fuck it, modern day killers really must take fun. More often people taking lives, rocking knives and guns. The real murder.
To me, it's... Now here's... my voice is going again. Let's have a drink. There we go. To me, it's very, very clean. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It works very well in the song. Because, obviously, it's in the forefront. You don't want to colour her voice too much. Otherwise, people will start saying, oh, it's not her, or whatever. People say all sorts of rubbish. But yes, in this case, it's very, very clean sounding. And that cleanliness kind of doesn't lend itself well to heavy metal. In heavy metal, it's always a case of like aggression and dirt and stuff like that. You don't record things cleanly, or if you do, you usually dirty them up later. But in this case, all the processing has already been done on the voice, to the point of there's even delay baked into this. If I find somewhere.
Then flee the scene. It's like that.
If you take my advice, you'll be killed by what you don't know. But the other saying that I like so much.
So yeah, there's reverb already on the vocal track. There's delay every now and then. It's already pre-baked in, so I can't do much with it. So I do what I can. First is a de-esser, because to my ears, it doesn't sound like those are de-esser used. It doesn't sound overly harsh, but this is just to like catch a few of the extra bits that really peaked out a bit more than I think they should have. They sound fine in the original track, but for some reason on their own, they really seem to like peak out a bit more than, I don't know. It's really weird. For some reason, it peaks out more on the stem than it does in the original track, and I don't know why. It might be the case of again, waveforms meshing in such a way that you don't get that issue. But in the stems, it felt like I had to control it because it felt like it was very plosive-y. So obviously, without.
Modern day killers really must take fun. More often people taking lives, rocking knives and guns. The real murder connoisseur was in the ruins of hell. Get used to luring the audience with more success. Cause to my surprise, snatch your last 40 eyes, can't she? Nice try, stopping the motherfucking Da Vinci of human.
Again, it just brings it a bit more under control. Prefer it's rap. I don't tend to usually deal with rap, so just basically I'm just trying to control it a little bit more is all I'm really doing there. And then obviously here we have this. Now this is a slight modified version of how I usually process vocals. So obviously without.
Fuck it, modern day killers really must take fun.
With.
More often people taking lives, rocking knives and guns. The real murder connoisseur is in the ruins of hell. Get used to luring the.
So it's very, very subtle. It's very subtle. It's the human voice, so it's very subtle anyway, the changes I can make. But what I'm doing here is, first of all, I'm adding a little bit of odd harmonics just to make it a bit warmer sounding. You know, because that added warmth like really helps when you add into like the gritty parts of it. It really sort of, it helps it, for lack of a better word, it helps it bloom a bit. It helps it bloom a bit. Then I've got I've actually got the de-esser here again, just dealing with something around about 4.5 kilohertz. Just controlling just a tiny bit, just keeping it under control. That's all I'm trying to do here. Then here I have a first compressor. This is to help catch some of the peaks. Again, RCA. I like RCA for voice, at least in this first thing anyway. Very fast attack and release. Not too harsh a ratio, only about 3, which isn't too bad. And it's only catching the peaks, so again, minus 0.8. No, minus 8, rather. Again, only catching the peaks here. That's all I'm really going for here. And this one here, I've got an optical. Here, I'm catching quite a bit more. I'm actually digging into the signal a bit more here. And again, a bit more compression, slower attack, slower release. The idea of this is this catches the peaks and like really reins them in. This sort of gives the sound character and sort of boosts it up a bit and gives it a bit more energy, in a sense. I don't fully know how to explain this. Here we also have the Neve trick again, because, you know, just to add a bit of coloration to the voice, because like I said, it's very clean sounding, and they've managed to get very, very clean sounding, and that's very good. But at the same time, I like a bit of color to my sounds. I don't like fully clean. I like a little bit of impurity just to make it unique. Basically, that's what I like. He says, using a very clean setup right now. But you watch. If when I have the money to get certain things, I'll be adjusting it slightly to get a bit more character out of all my stuff. But yes, that's basically all I can really do. Other things I added were reverb. So there's what I call a global reverb. Again, this has changed now from how I do things, but I will have how I work now, or at least how I used. So let's go with how I used to work first. So the way I used to work is I'd have one reverb, one delay. Actually, no, I'd have usually one reverb, one delay, one modulation. Occasionally, I might have another delay for like the lead stuff, but that's just because that lead delay is ping pong, and that's it. That's the only difference between the two. So what I would do there is I keep things very simple, and this is essentially the last of the very simple way about things, of how I go about things. So what I do in this is everything goes to the same reverb, but by very different amounts. And they'll be panned differently, obviously. This one's going in by -5. This one's going in at minus 16.9. The toms are going in at -15. They all go in at very different amounts, but the idea is still the same of like this one reverb, this room reverb. And I still follow that to the most part, where I can, I will send everything I can, minus the bass and rhythm stuff. I will send that to as I refer to it as essentially I call it the room. It's the idea of everything is sent to the same reverb, so everything sounds like it was recorded in the same room. Now, I branched out a bit more from that, in that I will then have a shorter reverb, just for some interesting effects and stuff. Maybe like a drum sort of reverb sort of thing. Something where it's like, I don't need loads, I just need some because I've got the room sort of thing. And then I'll have a long reverb for ambience and like more atmospheric sounds and stuff like that. And that's generally how I'm trying to go about things now. But this is kind of, I'm building off that ideology, in that it's like everything's recording in the one room, but now I have some rack mount stuff I can play with as well. That kind of idea. So track wise, that's pretty much everything. That's everything. There's the click track, but that's very boring. It just keeps count. That's all it does. Keeps me in time. That's all it really does. Yeah, in terms of the actual song, just how it sounds is how it sounds. So the reason why I changed, I'll get into more songwriting. The reason why I changed this first section here was entirely because I wasn't happy with the song just going straight into the, just going straight into the verse. It didn't have that punch like the original song does, because the guitars are already there, chewing, going dun 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 like that. So you already have the sound of the guitars. So you don't have this like impact anymore. That impact is gone because of how I'm doing things. So instead, the best way I could find was, what if at that point I kind of slowed down the chord progression, because I know the verse is relatively fast. If I play the verse here, it's got a very fast feel to it. So in that case, if I have a much slower introduction, like bridge before then, I can sort of build into it a bit more. So that's why I've got it sort of starts to build up and then goes back again. It's like, well, that's what I can describe it as. It's like it's building, 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 building more, going more, and back. And then it starts to build again. Is basically the way it kind of goes for me. So again, we're building more and more and more. And here we are, we've hit a good peak. This is like meant to really bring you in. It's like, what's this? What's going on here? This is meant to be a Calliope cover. I've never heard this before. And that's when that's meant to show the thing of like, I have changed things. So yeah. Then hold. Then that hits harder, because we've gone from a hold to hitting in fast. And then we get this. So the other thing I did is, in all these little breaks where, and basically what you hear here, where it goes in, break, in again. In all those breaks, I did it so the guitars were doing kind of different things every time. I mean, from verse 1 and verse 2, you get similarities there, but in terms of the actual verse itself, they're different every time. So on the individual verse level, each one of those like turnarounds are different. So if you listen here, just open. And that's kind of a sort of bounce where it goes da 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 da, like that sort of thing. Again, next here. And that's a very similar sort of thing as before, but with a lot more down picking. A lot more down picking to really make it a bit more frantic. And then that's the chorus bringing into this first part of the pre-chorus. Or rather, technically this is still the verse. This is like the bridge, maybe? No, this is pre-chorus. Next is bridge. Oh yeah, warning the swearing. 2 hours into the stream, warning the swearing. Again, this just has that sort of... Like, this is the part where I was on about where it's just G in the original. In this part, just G, 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 G. I mean, it's different octaves of G, and a few notes that go well with G, but it's just G. That's incredibly boring. It's incredibly boring. And the first string I tried was with the bass drum just going dun 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 dun, really genty sort of thing, playing along with the actual bass drum. I tried that and I got really bored. So instead I ended up watching a Brendan Small songwriting little course tip thing he did. I ended up watching that because I was just like, I've got no ideas. That was on my news feed. I've watched it before on my news feed, my YouTube feed. So I was like, okay, I'll watch that again. And I did, and I was like, oh, I've got an idea. What if I arpeggiate it? Because I've not done that in the song yet. I'll arpeggiate it, and then I'll have a melody go over the top of it. Just to really differentiate it. Because keep in mind, this is right at the start. That first part hasn't been written yet.
少し死んでください
And I just thought, it's all in G, so I can go anywhere with this. I can literally go anywhere with this as long as it's within G minor. I can go anywhere with this because there's no chords here, so I can add chords. So I did. So we've got C, B, actually B6, and then we've got A sharp. There we go. And then there's that brief moment there where it goes back to the original song, because for ages I was wondering what on earth should I do there, and I just realized I'll just do that. I'll just go back to the original. That's what I mean by ideas from verses come across, but the actual in an individual verse itself is very different. And that's one of the big differences here, is in the chords wise. In the actual song, what they do is they don't just go down all the time. It doesn't just go from A sharp down to A. It's like da-na. Sometimes they'll go da-da, like they'll go up. But then I always thought it'd be nice if it went up to C just for a variation. So I did that. I just added it. But yeah, they either go, sometimes I think in the song it does go up once. No, it goes up twice, but I didn't put that in the first one because I had different ideas. So I thought, right, it's definitely going in verse 2. Therefore, that's why it goes up here. And then back into the pre-chorus. And here we have the bass doing something different. We have the extra guitar as well. And here we get to the final 2 choruses, and yes, it's final 2 choruses. And I do variations, which I'll talk about in a second. So yeah, in this part, this is what I mean by everything all together. Everything's there. This is what I wanted. So yeah. And that's the coin drop. And yes, that is how it comes out of Pro Tools. And then it goes into mastering. Now, when I was doing this mastering, I actually used Ableton for it. Not Ableton. Audacity. Testing? No. What's it called? Audition. That's it. Adobe Audition. The university has it, so I'm able to make use of it as well. But I've been trying to move away from that because I'll say eventually I'll be doing it at university and then I won't have access to it. So yeah, mainly because I don't follow the whole thing of subscribing for a program. I think that's a terrible way of going about things. In fact, it's actually a way of going about things that I actively dislike quite a bit. So, say I will be using it afterwards. But in terms of mastering later on, I'm looking at a few different options. The current one I'm looking into is mastering within the DAW itself. Another one is... I'm saying my footages again. Another one I'm potentially looking into is mastering in another program, which is TC Electronics Finalizer, which is a software version of their rack mount processor rather, called the Finalizer, which is meant to be for mastering. So I'm looking into that as well. But I think I very much like the idea of mastering in the DAW, just because then I've got a whole bunch of plugins already there, good to go, that are compatible, and I can add to create interesting sounds. So now let's go back to the other things disabled on the master bus. So this is currently where I'm at in terms of trying to replicate what I did in Audition. So first things up is the passive EQ. Now in this case, I can actually go in much more depth. So immediately I like this more than I do Audition. It's in terms of like the actual, I actually do it in mid and side. So in terms of the side, it's exactly the same, but for the mid, I'm actually bumping up the bass quite a bit. But for the most part, it's very, very similar. The only difference is actually in the low end, because you don't really want the low end out the side. You want it in the mids, because the mid and side is basically, mid is what is the same between the left and right stereo channels. Side is what's different between them. So usually you're going to have stuff like the bass and the kick. They're going to be in the middle, and the vocals, they're in the middle. Stuff that's on the side is anything stereo that's out there more. So again, the fact that I can cut the low on just the side and give the mid a bit of a bass boost means that I can properly make sure that the bass itself has a healthy amount of bass, and the side content that doesn't need the bass is reduced, which is quite nice. So we have that. So again, if I just play from here, right, no, I'll play from here. This is it out, this is in. Doesn't do much, it's very, very subtle. Again, it's the passive EQ, so it's not necessarily a case of I'm trying to do anything drastic here. I'm just trying to push things ever so slightly. As much as it says here, I'm doing like 2.2 decibels, 3.5, 5.4 here. It's like, it's actually very subtle. I'm not trying to do anything big. That's why it's in mid-side mode. If it was in stereo mode, you'd hear it a bit more. This is a bit more interpretive of how this is working. So, yes. The idea in this is more, it's to push the highs out, so it sounds like the highs are coming out above and wider than your actual speakers, and the bass is coming out lower and deeper than your actual speakers as well. That's kind of what this is going for. It's like it's a gentle push, just to push things a little bit more. So we have that. Next, we have a new plugin of mine, which this is the first time using it, and it's something I'm going to use a little bit more often because I really like it, and it does the sound very well. This is the Focusrite Dwarma mastering processor emulation within this. So this is a replication of a piece of gear. And what this does is it adds like a sort of mastering compressor sound on top of it, which you can adjust here. You can have it be gentle, more high frequencies, extra clarity, D-rumble, extra punch, a wide mix, ambience, or a vocal enhanced. And you can choose if you want more high frequencies or not. So generally, this is how it sounds without. With. I'm still dialing it in a bit. Yeah, that's actually better. So that's roughly about there is where I would want it to be. I had it up at 60. I actually want it run down. In fact, actually, if I do an on and off again, No, I like that. That's good. That's good. Okay, so yeah, I like that. Again, that's the setting. Hey, I've got my video. I remember it very easily. And again, I have a mix between wet and dry, so I can dial that in per thing as well. So we have that. Here we have a stereo width. I'm just pushing a little bit more. I mean, this passive EQ already lets me push it a fair amount already. If I really want to, I could push it out much wider. But if I want to do stereo width, I can push it out a little bit more just by using this one control here. As you can see, it's only a little bit. It's 15% extra. Doesn't do much, but it does just enough. Again, this is sort of reinforcing the idea of it coming out ever so wider than your speakers can actually physically be. So it's meant to give that sort of impression. Plus, it can also be very useful if, for whatever reason, you're finding stuff which is like in the middle, like right in the middle of everything's meant to be right in the center, is poking out a bit too much. You can increase the width to like dial those back, or if you need more, decrease the width and bring them forward. It's a very useful tool in being able to do stuff like that. And last but not least is a maximizer, or in this case, it's actually a limiter. So what this does is this limits exactly how loud it can be. Now, in actuality, the way I would actually have it set up is I'd actually have this set all the way at 0.1, just so I've got a little bit of room, so I'm definitely not clipping. But in the case of this, just to make sure that everything is fine, I have it set to a ceiling of -1. Just so I've got extra headroom to make sure nothing definitely clips. Because I found that usually stuff going into OBS is a little bit hotter than what goes into this. So it's just to be on the safe side. So once again, we'll bring that up. We'll click on this so we go back to that. And again, this is just the basic one. This is the one that comes included with Pro Tools. This is one of those things I'm looking at replacing. That along with actually the Drama, that's it, the Drama processing as well. Those are the main things which would be like, okay, let's swap those out, and probably maybe even the stereo width as well, maybe even the passive EQ, for depending on what song I'm actually doing, and possibly even parallel particles too. Those will be things I would swap out of, you know, what is it needed sort of thing, or if it is there, they're very much a case of no presets, definitely do my own thing. But yes, this is one which is very much a case of you could find very much different variations on a limiter or a mastering clipper or something similar. And they all do very similar things, but they all sound ever so slightly different. But for now, I've got this one which came included with Pro Tools called Maxim. And obviously, this is without. Let it build up a bit. And this is with. So yes, the idea here is obviously to push everything louder a bit, but without anything actually, you know, causing issues. So if I want to, I can bring that up all the way to -0.1. Click play. As you can hear, very loud. Very, very, very loud. But that is kind of everything. As you can see, it clips there because it wasn't fast enough. It was adjusting still. But of course, as you can see, the idea is it stays right at the top there. Although the main thing I will say about this mix is I did try to go a lot more dynamic with the whole thing. The whole idea of this is very much that it was a much more dynamic mix. It was very much less compressed, very much not going for loudness war at all. As much as I said, oh yeah, I'm using this, and the other thing, it's going to make it louder and louder and louder. That's not necessarily what I'm going for. What I'm more so going for is that the potential maximum loudness is very high. But then again, the potential maximum lowness is also very low. So you get this massive range that you can work in that sounds a lot more musical and very nice. So a lot of compression I'm using a lot more sparingly. So especially in the mastering part, because I want it to sound powerful, But at the same time, I want it to be complex. I don't want it to be a brick wall. I want it to be complex and actually have a bit of complexity in the waveform. But yeah, let's listen to it all the way through, and then that's kind of it.
ミーナさん、今日の楽しいライブ配信に来てくれて誠にありがとうございます。今日もラップしたいと思います。では始めましょうか。
Of course that would happen. Yes, that's the other problem with the stuff I'm currently using. It's very CPU intensive, hence why I'm also looking for other things that are less CPU intensive. The main one that's really intense, actually no, the main ones that are very intensive here are, I mean, yeah, you can see the delay there. It's like, oh boy, that's adding a lot of delay to the whole thing. So there's a lot the computer has to do to be able to keep up with everything. Yes, the Maxim here is very, very, very CPU intensive. So ones I'm looking at to replace this include stuff like the brick wall limiter by TC Electronic. There's also the oh, sorry, I burped for a second. The Flatline by Submission Audio. And the interesting about that is that that doesn't actually run on the processor of the computer. It runs on the graphics card, which means that suddenly now we have a whole coding thing of like, we can actually put stuff on the graphics card instead, and that'll save up a lot more room on the processor, which means then like live, when I did that live show before, I could have used a limiter to really bring out more of the sound sort of thing and really make it sound exactly how I wanted it to. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to. So again, that's stuff I'm looking at. Again, for the stuff like the Drama, the main one I'm looking at for this is you get stuff like the Pro, the Fab Filter stuff. They're very good for mastering. There's a whole bunch of mastering stuff. There's the Softube Weiss mastering. But then again, this is by Softube as well, as you can see by the logo there. This is a Softube thing as well that's included as part of the Focusrite bundle. So part of the Time and Tone bundle, which is a very nice bundle. It's very good sounding. But yes, other ones I'm looking at for this are potentially, like I said before, the TC Electronic. A lot of TC Electronic stuff is very good. Generally, also, like I said, the Weiss stuff is also very good as well. Also, just looking for anything that will be very nice, looking for other EQs and stuff. Again, I've got this passive filter, which works very well and has a very similar layout to a mastering EQ I've seen before. So I think it's based on that. I'll have to look into it, but yeah, I knew it was going to run out because, yeah, in terms of other stuff that's really, really intensive is the vocal doubler. This is a massive CPU power hog. I mean, this on its own is causing a delay of nearly 2.4 thousand milliseconds. That's huge. That's ridiculously huge. Which is why I didn't end up using that live. Instead, I used a chorus when I needed to do a vocal double effect, or if I needed something similar like that, I used a chorus instead. Because as much as I like the vocal doubler sound, it's very, very intensive, which is kind of annoying. So, yeah. But yes, if you want to actually listen to the song in full, because seeing as I can't right now, because, you know, streaming, and I'm doing this, which is very intensive, I use a lot of CPU intensive plugins to really shape the sound and make the things do exactly what I want. But yes, if you want to listen to the full song, be sure to check out my channel. It's very nearly at 300 views, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but considering I've had that channel for 10 years, probably more than 10 years at this point, actually. 11 years now, I think. For 11 years, I upload very sporadically on it. Which reminds me, I need to upload a new video for that this weekend. It's just so I can keep on target with this. I have something for it, don't worry. But, and it's not this. But it's generally a case of I want to keep it revived, I want to keep it going, I want it to grow, I want it to grow. And that's the main thing I'm going for. So yes, the fact that that video's got over 300 views is something I'm very happy about. My most viewed cover has over 1,000, and it's like, oh, I don't even like that cover anymore. What I can do now is so much better than then. It's like, yeah. Maybe in the future I'll do a remix of it. That could be a thing I could do. But or do a new version of it. That's also a thing I could do. But yes, I think for now, that is kind of everything. I don't really have much else to say. So, I think we will leave things here. So yes, we've got the audio back here. I think we're very much case we're going to leave things here. I really hope you've enjoyed this. I know there's been something very different, and I've been talking the whole time. I've been going for 2.5 hours. So, that's fun. Not even a break. Mainly because it's too warm and I don't know what I want to eat. So, I've just said I'll eat after this because I don't know what I want. And honestly, I don't know if I want anything. I think I just want snacks. It's too warm. It's way too warm. It really is. It's getting cooler now, but it's still way too warm. It's awful. It's really awful. But yes, enough of my bickering. Like I said, I do hope you've enjoyed this. This is something different. Be sure to let me know what you think. Like the full video of this is going to go up on my Twitch archive, which is where it's going to look very much out of place. But at the same time, hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully people like it. I hope people do like it. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Until Thursday, and until I play something else, until then, I'll see you later. Till then, goodbye. And drop. FYI, the whole saying and drop thing is not going to be a new thing at the end of the videos. It's just, you know, that was kind of the drop in the song. Either way, goodbye.